You are listening to The Attic Ghost Spooky Tales, a series of short stories in the genres of horror, science fiction, paranormal, thriller, and fantasy. I'm your host, Kathy Finfrock, author of the thriller House of Redemption. Today's feature story is The Carrion Man by Nachin Casa. The Carrion Man perched on the body like a scavenger bird, his arms sleeved in blood. He plunged his hands into the corpse once more, pulled out a piece of flesh, and placed it in his mouth. Mara turned her face from him, squeezing her eyes shut. Her whole body began to tremble, and she clutched at the nearby door jamb for support. "Please, not now," she whispered through gritted teeth. A soft whimper from her right. Mara identified it as the sound a child would make. Sweat broke out on her brow, beating at first until it grew so heavy it trickled down. She moaned. "Shut up, you little brat," a muffled male voice commanded. The whimpering ceased as quickly as it had begun. Mara cracked an eye open, and from her kneeling position saw an elderly man cradling a young girl against him. Like her, they knelt upon the floor. Avoiding Carrion Man's gaze, she surveyed her surrounding once more. She was still in Dayton's Federal Bank, and the 5 men dressed in black and wearing ski masks were still robbing it. 4 members of the bank staff still knelt before all of them, hands crossed behind their heads. The murdered security officer was still dead and lying in a pool of his own blood. Carrion Man fed upon him. Mara's purse still lay on the table across the room. The man who had silenced the child had taken it from her when the robbery had begun. She had tried to keep hold of it, but he had torn it from her, breaking the strap as he did so. He had no way of knowing that when he had taken that bag, he had taken her sanity with it. "Mara," a sing-song voice called. Mara refused to turn. Of all of her hallucinations, the one she called Carrion Man was the worst. Her stomach churned as nausea flooded in. "God, please let it be over," she whispered. "It will never be over," Carrion Man said. He was closer now. Mara squirmed. "You shouldn't have listened to that quack. You aren't getting better. You're getting worse. By cutting down your medication, he's allowed me in. And there are worse things than me." Mara shuddered. 5 minutes, one of the masked men announced. Mara looked up, hoping to distract herself from her hallucination. 2 men were trying to break into the vault with the unwilling help of the bank manager, while 2 watched from guard positions in the lobby. The 5th man stood watch at the entry doors. Since it was nearing 5 o'clock, no other patrons had entered the building. Mara, the old man, his granddaughter, and an elderly couple were the only ones unlucky enough to be caught inside. The little girl began to cry again. The dark braided hair framing her face enhanced her pitiful expression. Her grandfather patted her back and whispered, but could not quiet her. "I said shut up," the bank robber said, nudging her with the toe of his boot. Old Man looked up into the masked man's face, his eyes windows to his suppressed rage. "What you gonna do, you old fart?" the robber taunted. "Creep," Mara muttered under her breath. Old Man pushed the little girl aside and tried to rise to his feet. As he did so, the robber struck him with his rifle, driving him back to his knees. The creep didn't stop there, clubbing the grandfather once more, knocking him to the floor. The little girl screamed. Alerted by the girl's cries, the other masked man approached. "What are you doing?" "Had to put him in his place," Creep sniffed. "Leave him alone and shut that girl up. We gotta move in 2 minutes. Creep pointed the muzzle of his firearms at the girl, his finger on the trigger. "Not that way," the second criminal cried, pushing the weapon aside. "Jesus, you know Alpha doesn't want any more casualties." "Delta," the man at the door called. "Cops!" The 2 men hurried through the lobby toward the 3rd. Mara took this opportunity to join the girl and her grandfather. "Grandpa!" the girl cried. Mara checked the man's pulse, alarmed by how weak it felt. Nonetheless, she turned to the girl and forced a smile. "Shh, honey, He's going to be fine. He'll wake up soon. He's going to die, Carrion Man whispered. They all are. Gooseflesh rose on Mara's arm. Her breath shortened. The voice grew closer. Soon he would caress her with blood-slick fingers, and when that happened, she would scream and scream, unable to stop. Her eyes strayed toward her purse. All she needed was one pill, and Carrion Man would disappear. He is not going to die, the girl snapped. He will live. All of them will live. Mara looked up from the elderly man's body, her eyes wide. She stared at the girl, whose eyes were focused on something behind her. What? The bloody man is wrong, the girl said. You see him? He's right behind you. Describe him. He's very white, and his skin is peeling off, and his teeth are black and sharp. His eyes. What about his eyes? They're black in the middle, but yellow all around. Mara closed her eyes. A smile tugging at her lips through tears spilled down her cheeks. She sees you, she cried, turning to the Carrion Man. She sees you too. The monster squatted directly behind her. He grinned. How do you know she's real? Mara looked at the girl. She reached out, grasped her by the arms, and pulled her forward. Who are you? What's your name? Lori. Lori Smith. How old are you, Lori? I'm 8 years old. Mara fingered the girl's dark braid. It was silky to the touch, as was the dress she wore. Silver braces adorned her teeth, and she smelled like bubble gum. A little piece of that purple gum was caught in the brace covering her front tooth. She's real, Mara argued. Creep will come back soon, and when he does, he'll be in a panic. He'll start shooting. I think he'll shoot you first, just 'cause you're there. You're going to taste so good. The monster licked his lips. You're not real, Mara said, shaking her head. Then take this. Take your pill and make me go away. In his decaying hand lay a bottle, her bottle. The label bore the name of her drug as well as her personal and physician's information. She reached forward and then hesitated. You don't need it, Lori said. I do, Mara said, choking back a sob. From the corner of her eye, Mara saw Lori walking into view. She held something in her little fist, and when she opened her hand, a small stone was revealed. It was a river rock, smooth and gray, polished for centuries by fresh running water. Mara stared at it in wonder. Take it, Lori said. A rock? Carrion Man laughed. Yeah, like that's gonna work. Trust me, Lori said. He's coming, Carrion Man said, and he doesn't look very happy. Creep had stripped off his ski mask, disheveling his hair and revealing his rugged countenance. His eyes were wild, and he argued with the man called Delta. Put your mask back on, Delta said. They'll see your face. It doesn't matter now, Creep replied, raising his gun. Trust me, Mara, Lori said, thrusting the stone at her. Take it before it's too late. Mara stared at the girl, her eyes wide with fear. My name? I never told you my name. How do you know my name? Carrion Man smiled in triumph. I told you there were worse things than me. No, Mara wailed. Hear me, Mara, the girl cried. It doesn't matter. You can still save them. You can save all of them. All you have to do is believe. Creep approached them. Mara heard his booted footsteps on the marble floor. She looked from the small hand to the large pale one. Choose, Carrion Man hissed. Choose, Lori said. The cold muzzle of the rifle was pressed to the back of Mara's head. She heard the soft click as the trigger depressed. She chose. Pain seared through the back of her head. It ricocheted about her brain, and her entire body spasmed in agony. Blackness clouded her vision. She squeezed the object in her hand and knew no more. When Mara awoke, her body lay upon a gurney. The interior of an ambulance surrounded her, and she felt the unpleasant tightening of a blood pressure sleeve on her left arm. The dizzying scent of pure oxygen filled her nostrils, and she pulled the mask which covered her face down to her chin. Her head ached. The paramedic tending to her smiled as he stripped the pressure sleeve from her arm. "You've got a nasty scalp wound, but otherwise you're fine. You're very lucky." Someone outside called the man's name, and he hurried out of the ambulance. He had left her alone, or so she thought. A soft cough sounded beside her. She froze. "Are you okay, miss?" a male voice said. She turned her head painfully to the right and saw Laurie's grandfather seated beside her. He faced her with a bandaged forehead and concern evident in his eyes. She favored him with a wan smile. "You're all right." "Yes. When I came to, the paramedics had arrived and the police had already arrested the bank robbers. I saw you lying on the floor, and I was sure you were dead. I guess the bullet only grazed your scalp." Mara touched her head and winced. The old man peered out of the doors. "They're moving the bodies now," he remarked. "Bodies?" Mara cried, rising to the sitting position. Her head pounded with the effort. "But there was only one body. Where is she? Where is your granddaughter?" "My granddaughter? I don't have a granddaughter, only grandsons." Mara closed her eyes and slumped back on the gurney. "He drowned, you know." "Who?" Mara murmured. "The one who knocked me down." Mara rose to her elbow. "How? How did he drown?" "I heard a paramedic talking to one of the police officers about it. They said he just collapsed. Said his lungs were full of water. They can't explain it." Something cold filled Mara's hands. She felt the smoothness of it and squeezed it until her knuckles whitened. "What happened to Laurie, the little girl?" "Oh, the girl," he chuckled. "Did you think I was her grandfather? No, though I wish I was. I found her waiting outside when I got here. I just kept her near me when the robbery started, trying to keep her safe." He touched his forehead and smiled sheepishly. "Anyway, she was here a little while ago, checking on us. Said for me to give you a message when you woke up." "What is it?" The paramedic suddenly appeared. He bore Mara's purse in one hand and her medication in the other. "Do you need this, miss?" He handed her the bottle. Mara studied the label and asked her question again. What was her message? She said, "He won't bother you anymore." Mara squeezed the stone in her hand and threw the bottle away. Thank you for listening to The Carrion Man by Nachin Casa. Visit my website at theatticghost.com for future podcasts, book releases, and free drawings.